Hello everyone, welcome to History and Culture. According to relevant sources, during the Qing Dynasty, a large-scale selection of young women was held every 3 years to choose candidates to enter the imperial palace. Emperor Xuanzhi once issued an edict stating that all young women between the ages of 13 and 16 from the 8 banners families must participate in this selection, aiming to choose the most beautiful women to serve as concubines for the emperor. Although the emperor's harem was already overcrowded, the selection continued to take place every 3 years. People may wonder why, with so many concubines already in the palace, the emperor still needed to introduce new women. For example, Emperor Qianlong had many concubines who were more than 30 years younger than him. In fact, this was not considered unusual at the time, rather, it was in line with the social and courtly norms of the era. The emperor of the Qing dynasty ruled over the entire empire, and this was not just a figure of speech. Regardless of whether the emperor was diligent in his governance, most of his daily time was spent dealing with state affairs. If we exclude time for eating and resting, the emperor's free time was very limited. Therefore, it was almost impossible for him to spend every day in romantic affairs with each of his concubines. However, as the ruler of the country, the emperor also had a very important responsibility, ensuring the continuation of his family line. After all, the issue of heirs determined the future of the nation. Therefore, the emperor had to consider the women in his harem and find ways to ensure that his descendants would carry on the imperial lineage. Thus, the periodic selection process became inevitable. Only by selecting young, healthy women could the emperor increase the likelihood of producing heirs and ensuring the continuation of the dynasty. In addition, there were some strict regulations. For example, once a concubine reached the age of 25, she would almost never be summoned to the emperor's bedchamber again. We might think that 25 is an ideal age for women to have children. So why was this age considered too old in the Qing dynasty? According to historical scholars, in ancient China, people generally had shorter lifespans. This was not only because children born from closely related families were often weaker, but also because medical conditions were very underdeveloped. Sometimes even a small cold could lead to death, especially for women. Reaching the age of 40 or 50 was already considered remarkable. For this reason, the Qing harem had a rule that once a concubine reached the age of 25, she would no longer be summoned to the emperor's chambers. This rule was based on concern for the health of the concubines, as a woman's physical condition often deteriorated with age, and the risks of childbirth increased. Additionally, in ancient China, people married at a relatively young age, and the Qing dynasty was no exception. People typically married around the age of 10, and by the age of 13 or 14, many women had already started having children. If a woman was still unmarried at the age of 20, she would often be seen as an old maid and the subject of ridicule. The imperial harem was also similar, with very few women entering the palace at an advanced age. Against this backdrop, once a woman in the harem surpassed the age of 25, she would be regarded as an older woman. This was not only due to physical aging but also because her fertility was considered to be on the decline. As a result, even if a woman had once been favored, once she grew older, it became difficult for her to continue to attract the emperor's attention. Furthermore, if a woman was in poor health before entering the palace, she was likely to be quickly eliminated in the palace's cutthroat political environment. Therefore, the life in the imperial harem often involved new concubines entering, while older ones left due to health problems, age, or palace intrigue. This explains why the harem continually saw a fresh influx of women, while the older ones gradually faded away. It is worth mentioning that although the Qing dynasty had a rule that women in the imperial harem who reached the age of 25 would no longer be summoned to the emperor's bedchamber, the emperor still retained the power to make his own choices. Sometimes, the emperor favored the consorts who had been with him from the beginning and showed less interest in newly entered women. For instance, Empress Dowager Cixi, a favorite consort of Emperor Guangxu, was often summoned to the emperor's chamber despite being over 50 years old. However, examples like Empress Dowager Cixi are relatively rare. According to historical records, Empress Dowager Cixi, originally named Waya, was one of the favored consorts of Emperor Guangxu, the fourth emperor of the Qing Dynasty. She was born on April 28, 1660, and passed away on June 25, 1723. She entered the palace in 1675 after participating in the Imperial selection of concubines. Less than 2 months later, she was given the title of Noble Lady and gradually rose through the ranks to become Consort Cixi and finally Empress Dowager Cixi. Empress Dowager Cixi was especially notable for her solid position in the Guangxu court, and she gave birth to several imperial princes. One of her sons, Zhen, later became the Qing Emperor Yongzheng. Despite her advancing age, Emperor Guangxu frequently summoned her to his chamber, which shows that she held a special place in his heart. After Emperor Guangxu's death, Empress Dowager Cixi was honored as Empress Dowager during the reign of her son, Emperor Yongzheng. According to historical sources, Emperor Yongzheng, Zhen, the fifth emperor of the Qing dynasty, was also known by his self-styled titles Poqing Jushi, Dust-Breaking Recluse, and Yuanming Zhuren, Master of the Complete Brightness. His reign, which lasted from 1722 to 1735, was marked by a series of profound reforms aimed at strengthening central authority and consolidating power. One of the key areas of his reform was the governance of ethnic minorities in the southwest. He implemented the Gaituguelu policy, which replaced the traditional Tusi system, local hereditary chieftains, with direct central administration, thereby enhancing control over the frontier regions. At the same time, Emperor Yongzheng abolished the discriminatory Jianji system, which discriminated against the poor, and introduced the Tanding Rumu policy, which shifted the tax burden from individuals, the number of male members in a household, to land. This reform significantly alleviated the burden on landless or land-poor peasants and also promoted population growth. In terms of finance, Emperor Yongzheng took steps to strengthen fiscal management by implementing the Haoxian Guigong policy, which required all surplus local revenue to be remitted to the central government, thus tightening control over national finances. He also created the Yanglian system, a system designed to prevent official corruption, and implemented the Guanshan Et model, which required both officials and landlords to share responsibility for public affairs and tax payments. In terms of politics, Emperor Yongzheng established the Mizhe system, allowing officials to secretly report important matters to the emperor. This measure was aimed at better monitoring the behavior of officials and ensuring efficient government operations. Emperor Yongzheng also established the Grand Council, Junji Chu, to assist him in handling military affairs. The Grand Council was composed of high-ranking officials, many of whom were selected from among the Grand Secretaries, ministers, and other high-ranking nobles. For example, Prince Yisun, Grand Secretary Zhang Tingyu, Minister of Revenue Jiang Tingxi, and Grand Secretary Tai were all appointed to serve in the Grand Council due to their noble status. In addition to the Grand Council ministers, there were also military ministers, Junji Zhangjing, who were selected from officials in the Imperial Court, the Hanlin Academy, the Six Ministries, and the Board of Rights. The Grand Council members worked part-time and continued to be managed by their original departments. Initially, the Grand Council did not have designated officials or a formal office but was housed in a small room near the Yongzheng Emperor's sleeping quarters at the Longzong Gate. This arrangement made it convenient for the ministers to be summoned at any time to attend to official matters. Without a formal office, the Grand Council became a highly flexible and independent institution. Moreover, Emperor Yongzheng improved the system for selecting a successor, making the imperial succession more institutionalized and reducing the power struggles between the princes that had occurred during the later years of Emperor Guangxu's reign. This system ensured a clearer and more stable choice of heir and minimized internal conflicts within the harem. Some historians believe that the series of reforms implemented by Emperor Yongzheng was crucial for the Kangxian prosperity, the prosperous era of the Kangxi, Yongzheng, and Qianlong emperors, in the later years of the Qing dynasty. These reforms laid a solid foundation for the long reign of Emperor Qianlong. As such, both Emperor Yongzheng and Empress Dowager Cixi left a profound mark on Qing history, becoming influential historical figures. This is the History and Culture channel. Liking and subscribing are the greatest help and support to us. Thank you everyone and see you in the next time.